long before the pyramids cast their shadows across the desert sands, and even before the first whispers of civilization echoed in distant Mesopotamia, the story of London began not with bricks and mortar, but with the patient, ceaseless flow of a river. This river, the Thames, has for millennia been the silent, enduring witness to the unfolding drama of human existence in this particular bend of the earth. Imagine, if you will, a time so far removed from our own that the very landscape would be unrecognizable. We are speaking of epochs stretching back hundreds of thousands of years to the lower Paleolithic period, when the land we now know as Britain was not an island, but a peninsula, connected to continental Europe by a vast, fertile plain. The Thames of this distant past was a far grander, more untamed waterway than the one we know today. It was a braided river, shifting its course across a wide, flat valley, fed by meltwater from colossal ice sheets that had sculpted the northern reaches of the continent. Lush, dense forests of oak, elm, and lime trees blanketed the higher ground, while the riverbanks were fringed with willow and alder, creating a rich, vibrant ecosystem. Woolly mammoths, their shaggy coats dusted with snow, lumbered through the valleys, their immense forms dwarfing the ancient trees. Rhinoceroses, hippopotamuses, and even saber-toothed cats roam these primordial landscapes, their roars and snarls echoing through the silent, misty mornings. The air itself would have been thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the wild, untamed essence of a world still in its infancy. It was into this primal setting, approximately 450,000 years ago, that the first human ancestors, likely Homo heidelbergensis, began to leave their faint yet indelible marks. These early hominins, not yet Homo sapiens, were nomadic hunter-gatherers, following the migratory patterns of the great beasts and adapting their lives to the rhythms of the seasons. Their presence is attested by the discovery of flint tools, meticulously crafted hand axes, found in the ancient gravels of the Thames terrace deposits. These tools, often almond-shaped and sharpened on both sides, were not merely utilitarian objects. They represent a profound leap in cognitive ability, requiring foresight, planning, and a sophisticated understanding of material properties. The finding of such tools at sites like Swanscombe, in what is now Kent, provides tangible evidence of their existence, offering a direct link to these incredibly distant forebears. Imagine one of these early toolmakers, sitting by the ancient Thames, chipping away at a flint nodule, the rhythmic clink, clink, clink of stone on stone, breaking the primeval quiet. Perhaps they were fashioning a tool to butcher a freshly caught deer, or to scrape hides for warmth against the encroaching cold. As the millennia rolled on, marked by cycles of glacial advance and retreat, the Thames continued its slow, inexorable journey. Each ice age reshaped the landscape, carving new valleys, depositing fresh layers of sediment, and altering the river's course. During warmer interglacial periods, the land would bloom again, providing abundant resources for successive waves of hominins. Around 250,000 years ago, during the Hoxnean interglacial, the climate was even warmer than today, and evidence suggests a thriving ecosystem along the river. This period saw the continued presence of early human groups, adapting their hunting strategies to the changing fauna. One of the fascinating aspects of this deep past is the question of how these early groups communicated and organized themselves. While we have no direct evidence of their language, the complexity of their tools suggests a level of cooperation and shared knowledge. Historians and archaeologists still debate whether these early hominins had developed rudimentary forms of symbolic thought, or if their existence was purely pragmatic, driven by immediate survival needs. Perhaps these walls of ancient forest whispered stories to the stars, or perhaps the only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the calls of wild creatures. The truth remains shrouded in the mists of time, a tantalizing mystery that continues to fuel scholarly inquiry. The arrival of Homo sapiens in Britain is a more recent chapter in this ancient story, though still incredibly distant from our modern era. Around 40,000 years ago, during the Upper Paleolithic, anatomically modern humans began to spread across Europe. These early Homo sapiens were even more sophisticated hunters and gatherers, employing a wider range of tools, including blades, burins, and spear points, often made from bone and antler as well as flint. They also demonstrated early forms of artistic expression, though direct evidence of cave art or portable art is rarer in the Thames Valley compared to other parts of Europe. Their presence along the Thames would have been characterized by temporary encampments strategically located near prime hunting grounds and reliable water sources. They would have fished the river's abundant waters, hunted the migrating herds, and gathered wild plants, berries, and nuts from the surrounding forests. The transition from the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic period, roughly 10,000 years ago, marked a significant shift in the landscape and human adaptation. The last great ice age had receded, and the land bridge connecting Britain to Europe was finally submerged by rising sea levels, transforming Britain into an island. This dramatic geographical change forced human populations to adapt to a new, insular environment. The Thames, now a true island river, became even more central to life in the region. Mesolithic communities were highly mobile, using canoes to navigate the river and its tributaries, exploiting the rich aquatic resources. Their tools, known as microliths, were tiny geometrically shaped flints, often hafted into wooden or bone handles to create composite tools like arrows, harpoons, and sickles. These smaller, more versatile tools reflect a shift towards hunting smaller game, fowling, and intensive fishing. The Thames, with its abundant fish and waterfowl, would have been a lifeline, a highway, and a larder for these resourceful people. One lesser-known detail from this period concerns the potential for ancient fish traps along the Thames. While direct archaeological evidence is scarce due to the river's dynamic nature and subsequent development, it is highly plausible that Mesolithic communities constructed elaborate wattle and timber fish weirs, guiding fish into enclosures for easier capture. Imagine the ingenuity required to build such structures, harnessing the river's flow and the communal effort involved in their construction and maintenance. These traps would have provided a reliable source of protein, allowing communities to thrive even in challenging conditions. The rhythmic splash of fish caught in the woven traps would have been a familiar sound along the ancient riverbanks. As we move closer to the dawn of recorded history, the Neolithic period, beginning around 6,000 years ago, brought the most profound transformation yet: the adoption of agriculture. This was not a sudden revolution, but a gradual process, as ideas and practices spread from continental Europe. Early farmers began to clear patches of forest along the Thames Valley, planting crops like wheat and barley, and domesticating animals such as cattle, sheep, and pigs. This shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer existence to a more settled, agrarian lifestyle fundamentally altered human society. Permanent settlements began to emerge, often on slightly elevated ground overlooking the river, providing both fertile land and defensive advantages. The landscape itself began to bear the imprint of human activity, with fields replacing wild forests and trackways forming between emerging communities. The Thames, once a wild, untamed artery, began to be viewed in a new light, as a source of irrigation, a transport route for goods, and a focal point for emerging social structures. The earliest evidence of causeways and wooden trackways across marshy areas along the Thames suggests a growing need for connectivity and trade between these nascent agricultural communities. These early structures, though simple, represent the very first steps towards infrastructure, laying the groundwork for the complex networks that would eventually define a city. The river, which had always been the silent witness, now became an active participant in human endeavor, its currents carrying not just sediment, but the seeds of future civilization. The echoes of these ancient lives, their struggles, their innovations, and their quiet communion with the land and the river still resonate in the very soil beneath our feet. If you're enjoying this, make sure to subscribe and leave in the comments the time and place you're listening from. The mists that had long shrouded the Thames, whispering secrets to the ancient trees, began to part with the arrival of a new, formidable presence. It was the year 43 CE, and the distant echoes of imperial ambition had finally reached these shores. Under the command of Emperor Claudius, 4 mighty legions, their standards emblazoned with eagles, landed in Richborough, Kent, initiating the Roman conquest of Britannia. Their purpose was clear: to extend the vast network of Roman power, culture, and commerce to this wild, resource-rich island. As they advanced, pushing ever northward, they encountered the winding tidal river, a natural artery leading deep into the interior. Here, at a point where the Thames narrowed, making it ideal for crossing, and where 2 small hills offered strategic vantage points, the Romans saw potential. This was not a pre-existing settlement of any great size, perhaps a few scattered huts, a ford used by local tribes, but to the Roman engineers and strategists, it was a blank canvas. They began to build not just a camp, but a bridge, a testament to their engineering prowess and their determination to tame the landscape. This first bridge, likely a sturdy timber structure, was more than just a crossing. It was a statement, a vital link in the burgeoning network of Roman roads that would soon crisscross Britannia. Around this strategic bridgehead, a settlement began to coalesce. It wasn't initially a planned city, but rather a hub of activity. Supplies for the legions moving further north were unloaded here, goods from the continent arrived, and local resources, particularly timber and grain, were gathered for transport. The clatter of legionaries, the shouts of merchants, and the rhythmic thud of hammers building docks and warehouses replaced the gentle lapping of the river and the calls of waterfowl. This nascent trading post, positioned at the lowest bridging point of the Thames, quickly became known as Londinium. The exact etymology of the name remains a gentle mystery. Some scholars suggest it derives from a Celtic personal name, Londinos, meaning the wild one, while others propose a more prosaic origin related to a word for place of floods. Regardless of its linguistic roots, Londinium was growing, a bustling, chaotic frontier town, a true melting pot of Roman ambition and local resilience. Within a mere 17 years of the invasion, by 60 or 61 CE, Londinium had already established itself as a significant commercial center. The Roman historian Tacitus, in his Annals, describes it not as a colony or a municipality, but as a center for a great many merchants and much merchandise. This rapid growth, however, was about to be brutally interrupted. The Iceni tribe, led by their formidable queen Boudica, rose in rebellion against Roman rule, fueled by grievances over land, taxation, and the brutal treatment of her family. As Boudica's forces swept through the province, burning Colchester and marching on Londinium, the Roman governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus made a grim strategic decision. He evacuated the city, deeming it indefensible against the overwhelming numbers of the Iceni. The residents, many of them Roman citizens and traders, were forced to flee, leaving behind their homes and livelihoods. What followed was a terrifying spectacle. Boudicca's forces descended upon Londinium, unleashing their fury. The wooden buildings, many still new, quickly succumbed to the flames. Archaeological evidence vividly corroborates Tacitus's account, revealing a thick layer of burnt debris, often several inches deep, beneath the later Roman levels. This Boudiccan destruction layer is a poignant reminder of the fragility of early Roman control and the fierce resistance it sometimes met. The city, so newly established, was utterly razed, yet, like a phoenix, Londinium would rise from its ashes. The Romans, after crushing Boudicca's rebellion in a decisive battle, were determined to rebuild and force their grip on Britannia. Londinium, with its strategic location, was too important to abandon. The reconstruction was swift and deliberate, this time with a greater emphasis on Roman urban planning. The new Londinium was laid out on a more organized grid pattern, a familiar feature of Roman cities, with straight streets intersecting at right angles. Public buildings began to emerge, reflecting the sophisticated infrastructure of the empire. By the end of the 1st century CE, Londinium was a thriving provincial capital, perhaps even surpassing Colchester in importance. Its population, a diverse mix of Romans, Britons, Gauls, and other peoples from across the empire, swelled to an estimated 30,000 to 60,000. The city was a vibrant tapestry of sights and sounds. Imagine the hum of activity around the Forum and Basilica, the heart of civic life. The Basilica, a vast hall for law courts and public meetings, would have dominated the skyline, its imposing columns and vaulted ceilings a testament to Roman grandeur. Adjacent to it, the Forum bustled with merchants hawking their wares, citizens discussing politics, and officials conducting their duties. Water was essential for Roman life, and Londinium was no exception. A sophisticated system of aqueducts and wooden pipes brought fresh water into the city, supplying public baths, fountains, and private homes. The Roman baths were not just places for hygiene, they were social centers, places to relax, exercise, and conduct business. The steam and warmth, the murmur of voices, the splash of water, these would have been constant sounds in the city's bathhouses. While the exact location of all of Londinium's bathhouses is still debated, significant remains of one, the Huggen Hill bathhouse, have been excavated, offering a glimpse into this vital aspect of Roman daily life. Temples dedicated to Roman gods and goddesses, like Jupiter, Mars, and Minerva, would have dotted the cityscape, their altars smoking with offerings. But Londinium was also a place where diverse spiritual traditions mingled. Evidence suggests the presence of temples to Eastern cults, such as Mithraism, a mystery religion popular among soldiers and merchants, and even early Christian communities. Perhaps in the quiet corners of the city, away from the grand temples, small groups of Christians gathered, sharing their beliefs in hushed tones, their faith slowly taking root in this imperial outpost. The port of Londinium was a constant hive of activity. Ships from Gaul, Hispania, and even further afield would have docked along the Thames, unloading amphorae filled with wine and olive oil, fine pottery, luxury goods, and building materials. In return, Britannia exported lead, tin, grain, and perhaps even slaves. The wharves would have been noisy, chaotic places, filled with the shouts of dock workers, the creak of ropes, and the smell of salt and foreign spices. The river, once a natural barrier, had become the city's lifeline, connecting it to the vast Roman world. Beneath the paved streets, a complex system of sewers carried waste away, a marvel of ancient engineering that speaks to the Roman commitment to public health and urban sanitation. The city was also protected by a formidable wall built around 200 CE. This massive defensive structure, up to 6 meters high and 2.5 meters thick, encircled the city, defining its boundaries and providing a sense of security. Its construction was a monumental undertaking, requiring vast quantities of ragstone, flint, and mortar, and it stood as a powerful symbol of Roman authority and permanence. Portions of this wall, remarkably, still survive today. Integrated into later medieval structures, a silent testament to Londinium's enduring legacy. Life in Roman Londinium was a blend of the familiar and the foreign. Latin was the official language, spoken in the forum and by administrators, but a cacophony of other languages would have been heard in the markets and taverns. Roma. In law, Roman customs and Roman art permeated daily life. Villas with mosaic floors and hypocaust heating systems offered comfort to the wealthy, while the majority of the population lived in more modest, timber-framed houses, often with shops on the ground floor. Yet, even in this Romanized city, the echoes of the indigenous British culture persisted. The Roman presence was powerful, but it never entirely erased the local traditions. Perhaps in the quiet corners of homes, old stories were still told in Celtic tongues, and ancient beliefs were subtly woven into the fabric of daily life. Historians still debate the extent of cultural assimilation in Roman Britain. Was it a complete Romanization? Or did a distinct Romano-British culture emerge, blending elements of both? The truth likely lies somewhere in between, a complex interplay of dominance and adaptation. For nearly 4 centuries, Londinium flourished as a vital hub of the Roman Empire. It was a city of ambition, commerce, and order, a place where the grid of Roman streets laid the foundational pattern for future thoroughfares. The roads that stretched out from its gates connected it to the wider province, facilitating trade and military movements. The wealth generated by its port and markets flowed back to Rome, a testament to its economic importance. But the vast Roman Empire, stretched thin by internal strife and external pressures, began to falter. From the late 4th century CE onwards, the grip of Rome on its distant provinces began to weaken. Resources were diverted to defend the heartland, legions were recalled, and the imperial administration became increasingly strained. The signs of decline were subtle at first, perhaps a slowing of trade, a reduction in new building projects, a growing sense of unease. By the early 5th century, the official ties between Rome and Britannia were severed. In 410 CE, the Emperor Honorius famously told the Britons to look to their own defenses. The legions, once the symbols of unwavering power, had departed, leaving Londinium and the rest of Britannia to face an uncertain future. The grand public buildings, the Forum, the Basilica, the Baths, they would not have crumbled overnight. But without the constant maintenance and civic organization of the Roman state, their decline was inevitable. The vibrant life that had pulsed through Londinium for so long began to recede. The sophisticated infrastructure, the aqueducts and the sewers, slowly fell into disrepair. The great port, once teeming with ships, saw fewer and fewer arrivals. The city's population dwindled, perhaps dispersing into the countryside, seeking sustenance and security in a world no longer governed by Roman order. The grand houses and public spaces would have become quiet, then derelict, gradually reclaimed by nature. The fate of Londinium after the Roman withdrawal is one of history's great silences. Unlike some Roman cities that continued as centers of population, Londinium seems to have largely emptied. The precise reasons for this abandonment are still debated. Was it a gradual decline, or did specific events, such as raids by Anglo-Saxon invaders, accelerate its demise? We can only imagine the silence that would have descended upon the once bustling streets, the wind whistling through empty doorways, the stones of the Great Wall standing sentinel over a ghost city. For centuries, the Roman grid, the foundations of the Forum, the remains of the bridge, lay buried beneath layers of earth and time, a forgotten testament to a powerful civilization. The very name Londinium faded from common use, only to be rediscovered much later through archaeological excavation and scholarly research. The city that had risen from the marshy banks of the Thames, a beacon of Roman power and ingenuity, had returned to the earth, waiting for a new era to begin, for new peoples to arrive and build upon its ancient foundations. Perhaps these silent stones whispered stories to the stars, awaiting the moment when the city would awaken once more, albeit in a very different form. The grand tapestry of Roman Londinium, once so vibrant and meticulously woven, began to fray at the edges, threads loosening as the empire itself stretched thin, pulled taut across vast distances. By the early 5th century, the legions, once the city's protectors and enforcers of imperial will, were recalled, their steady tread echoing away, leaving behind a profound silence. The once bustling streets, paved and purposeful, grew quiet. The great forum, where merchants haggled and citizens debated, saw fewer and fewer faces. Villas, once alive with the murmur of Latin and the clinking of amphorae, slowly succumbed to the creeping tendrils of ivy and the patient decay of time. It wasn't a sudden cataclysmic collapse, but rather a slow, almost imperceptible fading, like a lamp burning down to its last flicker. The sophisticated infrastructure, the aqueducts that had brought fresh water, the baths that had offered warmth and communal solace, fell into disrepair. Without the centralized Roman administration, the complex systems that sustained urban life began to unravel. The population, once numbering in the tens of thousands, dwindled dramatically. Many of those who remained likely sought sustenance from the land, turning away from the urban dream to a more agrarian existence. The magnificent Roman walls, built for defense, now stood as silent, crumbling monuments to a bygone era, their gates perhaps swinging idly in the wind, or standing open to empty spaces where once legions marched. For a time, the very name of Londinium seemed to fade from common use, swallowed by the mists of history. It became a ghost city, its grand buildings slowly reclaimed by nature, their stones perhaps scavenged for humbler dwellings, or simply left to crumble into the earth from which they came. The river, however, remained, an enduring constant, flowing past the silent ruins, carrying with it the whispers of a forgotten age. As the Roman light dimmed, new peoples began to arrive on these shores, sailing across the North Sea in long, clinker-built ships. These were the Anglo-Saxons, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, migrating from what is now northern Germany and Denmark. They were not city builders in the Roman mold, but rather agriculturalists and warriors, establishing smaller, dispersed settlements, often centered around fertile land or strategic river crossings. The Roman city, with its imposing stone structures, held little appeal for them. They preferred timber and thatch, a more organic architecture that blended with the landscape. For perhaps 2 centuries, the site of Londinium lay largely abandoned, a wilderness of ruins. Historians still debate the exact fate of the remaining Romano-British population during this period. Did they flee? Did they assimilate? Or did they simply fade away, their culture absorbed by the new arrivals? The archaeological record offers tantalizing clues, but no definitive answer, leaving a veil of mystery over this transitional age. By the 7th century, however, a new settlement began to emerge, not within the old Roman walls, but about a mile to the west, along the Strand. This was Lundenwic, the London trading place. Its location was no accident. It lay on the north bank of the Thames, still a vital artery for trade, and just upstream from the Roman ruins, perhaps offering a sense of continuity without being constrained by the decaying infrastructure. This new London was a very different place from its Roman predecessor. It was not a grand imperial city, but a bustling, practical trading emporium, a hub for goods moving across the nascent Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and beyond. Archaeological excavations in areas like Covent Garden have revealed extensive evidence of this settlement, including workshops, timber buildings, and a vast array of artifacts indicating a vibrant mercantile life. Lundenwic was characterized by its long, narrow plots of land stretching back from the river, each likely housing a workshop or a dam, welling with space for trade. Craftsmen hammered metal, weavers spun wool, and potters shaped clay, their wares destined for local markets or for export across the sea. The air would have been filled with the sounds of commerce, the creak of carts, the chatter of merchants in various dialects, the rhythmic clang of the smithy. It was a dynamic, organic settlement, growing in response to the needs of trade and community, rather than by imperial decree. This was a time of shifting allegiances and emerging kingdoms. Lundenwic found itself strategically positioned between the powerful kingdoms of Mercia and Wessex, often changing hands as these Anglo-Saxon powers vied for dominance. Its prosperity, however, was its constant, drawing people and goods from far and wide. One of the lesser-known facts about Lundenwic is the discovery of numerous sklatas, small silver coins, minted during this period. These coins claimed many prominence during this period, often depicting stylized human figures or animals, were crucial for facilitating trade and indicate a sophisticated monetary economy. Their widespread presence suggests that Lundenwic was not just a local market, but an international port, connecting Anglo-Saxon England to the wider European network of trade. Goods like pottery from the Rhineland, glass from Francia, and even exotic spices from further afield would have passed through its bustling wharves. The river, ever the city's lifeblood, would have been crowded with small, flat-bottomed boats laden with goods, their sails catching the wind as they navigated the tides. However, the prosperity of Lundenwic also made it an attractive target. From the late 8th century, a new threat emerged from across the sea. The Vikings, Norse raiders renowned for their longships and their ferocity, began to plague the coasts of England. Lundenwic, with its wealth and its vulnerable position on the Thames, became a repeated target. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a collection of historical records, vividly describes several Viking attacks on London. In 842, it records a great slaughter in London, suggesting a particularly devastating raid. These were not mere skirmishes, they were brutal assaults, designed to plunder wealth and instill terror. The timber buildings of Lundenwic offered little defense against fire, and its inhabitants would have faced a terrifying choice: flee or fight. The constant threat of Viking raids profoundly impacted the development of Lundenwic. The open, sprawling nature of the settlement, so conducive to trade, made it difficult to defend. The lack of strong fortifications meant that each attack could be catastrophic. The raids culminated in the mid-9th century with the arrival of the Great Heathen Army, a massive Viking force that campaigned across England. London was repeatedly occupied and plundered by these invaders. This period of intense Viking pressure ultimately led to a significant shift in London's topography and defense. The constant insecurity forced a fundamental reconsideration of how and where the city should exist. It was Alfred the Great, the King of Wessex, who ultimately turned the tide against the Vikings. A brilliant military strategist and a visionary leader, Alfred understood the importance of securing strategic locations. In 886, after years of struggle, Alfred formally reoccupied and began to refortify the old Roman city site, the very place that had lain largely abandoned for centuries. This was a momentous decision. It marked a conscious return to the defensive strength of the Roman walls. The old Roman defenses, though crumbling, still offered a formidable advantage over the open settlement of Lundenwic. Alfred's engineers would have worked to repair and strengthen these ancient ramparts, transforming the ghost city into a bulwark against Viking incursions. This strategic move led to the gradual abandonment of Lundenwic on the Strand. People began to move back within the safety of the Roman walls, establishing a new, more defensible settlement that would eventually become known as Lundenburg or Lundenburg, a fortified town. The old Roman street plan, though perhaps obscured by centuries of neglect, would have provided a framework for the new layout. This shift was not instantaneous. It was a slow, deliberate process, driven by the pressing need for security. The Strand area, once the heart of Lundenwic, slowly reverted to fields and open land, though echoes of its former life would have lingered in the scattered timbers and forgotten artifacts. The emergence of London as a fortified burg under Alfred was a critical step in the slow emergence of English identity. Alfred's reign saw not only military victories, but also a renaissance of learning and a strengthening of Anglo-Saxon culture. By securing London, he established a vital economic and political center that would play an increasingly important role in the unification of the disparate Anglo-Saxon kingdoms into a single English nation. The city, once a Roman outpost, then a vulnerable trading post, now became a symbol of Anglo-Saxon resilience and a cornerstone of a nascent kingdom. The legacy of Lundenwic, however, should not be underestimated. It was a testament to the enduring spirit of trade and enterprise that would always define London. It demonstrated that even without the might of an empire, a community could thrive through commerce and connection. Its existence on the Strand also laid the groundwork for future westward expansion of the city, a pattern that would continue for centuries. The transition from Roman Londinium to Saxon Lundenwic, and then back to the fortified Roman site, tells a story of adaptation, resilience, and the relentless flow of history. Each iteration of London, though distinct, carried within it the echoes of what came before, like layers of sediment in the riverbed, each contributing to the rich, complex geology of the city. The river, oblivious to the rise and fall of empires and settlements, continued its timeless journey, a silent witness to the unfolding drama of human endeavor. The year 1066 arrived, a year etched into the very bedrock of England, and London, though not yet the undisputed heart of the realm, felt the tremors of its coming. Harold Godwinson, crowned king in Westminster Abbey itself, had barely begun his reign when news arrived of a formidable invasion. To the north, Harald Hardrada of Norway, a Viking king of immense stature and ambition, landed with a vast fleet, claiming the English throne. Harold, with remarkable speed, marched his weary but determined army north, meeting the Norwegians at Stamford Bridge. It was a brutal, decisive victory for the English, a final, glorious stand against the Viking Age. Yet, even as the cheers of triumph faded, a new, more ominous whisper traveled on the wind from the south. William, Duke of Normandy, had landed at Pevensey Bay. This was no mere raid. This was a conquest. William, a man of iron will and strategic brilliance, brought with him a formidable army, a blend of Norman knights, Breton mercenaries, and Flemish archers, all eager for land and glory. Harold, his forces depleted and exhausted from the northern campaign, was forced to turn south again, marching his men back across the length of England. The two armies met on Senlac Hill, near Hastings, on a blustery October day. The battle was long and bloody, a clash of shield walls and cavalry charges, of arrows darkening the sky. By day's end, Harold lay dead, an arrow perhaps piercing his eye, and the Anglo-Saxon era of England drew to a close. London, meanwhile, found itself in a precarious position. Its citizens, accustomed to a degree of self-governance and proud of their ancient liberties, initially resisted the Norman advance. The city gates remained closed, and a small, defiant stand was made. However, the sheer might of William's army, coupled with the loss of their king, soon swayed their resolve. William, rather than storming the city, chose a more strategic approach. He circled London, devastating the surrounding countryside, cutting off its supplies, and demonstrating his overwhelming power. The message was clear. Resistance was futile. In December of 1066, the city elders, along with prominent clergy and nobles, emerged to offer William the crown. It was a pragmatic surrender, a recognition of the new reality. On Christmas Day, in the very same Westminster Abbey where Harold had been crowned just months before, William was anointed King of England. The ceremony, however, was not without incident. Norman guards outside, mistaking the acclamations of the English within for a riot, began to set fire to nearby houses, causing panic and chaos. It was an inauspicious beginning, a stark reminder of the cultural chasm that now separated ruler and ruled. William, now known as William the Conqueror, understood the importance of securing London. He recognized its strategic location, its burgeoning trade, and its symbolic power. His first and most enduring act of consolidation was the construction of the White Tower, the central keep of what would become the Tower of London. This wasn't merely a royal residence, it was a fortress, a visible symbol of Norman authority imposed upon the conquered city. Its massive stone walls, rising starkly against the sky, were designed to be both a deterrent and a declaration. Built by skilled masons, likely brought from Normandy, its construction was a monumental undertaking, taking decades to complete. The tower's presence fundamentally altered London's skyline and its political landscape. It served as a royal palace, a prison, a treasury, and an armory, embodying the new king's absolute power. Historians still debate the precise psychological impact of the tower's construction on the Anglo-Saxon populace. Was it primarily a symbol of oppression, or did its sheer scale also inspire a grudging respect for the new order? Perhaps it was both, a constant, looming reminder of a world irrevocably changed. Beyond the tower, William's reign brought profound changes to London's governance and society. The Anglo-Saxon aristocracy was largely dispossessed, their lands and titles redistributed to Norman loyalists. French became the language of the court, law, and administration, though English continued to be spoken by the vast majority of the population, slowly absorbing Norman French words and evolving into the language we recognize today. London, however, managed to retain some of its unique privileges. In 1067, William issued a charter remarkably brief and written in Old English, confirming the city's rights and liberties. This shrewd move helped to pacify the Londoners, ensuring their cooperation and preventing widespread rebellion within the city walls. It was a testament to London's existing importance that William felt it necessary to make such a concession. The Norman conquest, while initially disruptive, ultimately laid the groundwork for London's growth into a truly dominant medieval capital. With a stable, centralized monarchy, trade flourished. London's port, already active, saw increased traffic as goods flowed in and out of the realm. The city became a hub for merchants from across Europe, dealing in wool, cloth, wine, and spices. This economic vitality spurred the growth of guilds, associations of craftsmen and merchants who regulated their trades, ensured quality, and protected their members' interests. The mercers, the grocers, the drapers, the goldsmiths, and many others began to form, their halls and meeting places becoming important features of the urban fabric. These guilds not only shaped London's economy, but also played a significant role in its civic life, often providing services, maintaining infrastructure, and even wielding political influence. Religious institutions also underwent a transformation. The Normans, deeply pious, embarked on a grand program of church building and reform. Westminster Abbey, already a significant royal church, was further embellished and expanded, becoming the preferred site for coronations and royal burials. Its soaring arches and intricate stonework were a testament to Norman architectural prowess and a reflection of their devotion. Beyond the abbey, numerous smaller churches and monastic houses were founded or rebuilt throughout London. These institutions were not just places of worship, they were centers of learning, charity, and social activity. Monasteries like St. Paul's Cathedral, which had an Anglo-Saxon predecessor but was rebuilt in a grander Norman style after a fire in 1087, became vital intellectual and administrative centers, holding vast lands and employing many Londoners. The presence of so many religious houses contributed to the city's spiritual life and its charitable network. Caring for the poor and the sick. The physical landscape of London continued to evolve under Norman influence. The narrow, winding streets of the Anglo-Saxon burh remained, but new stone buildings, particularly churches and the homes of wealthy merchants, began to replace older wooden structures. The city walls, dating back to Roman times, were maintained and perhaps strengthened in places, defining London's boundaries and offering a degree of protection. Outside the walls, suburbs began to sprawl, driven by population growth and the need for more space. Fields and gardens gave way to new dwellings and workshops. The Thames, ever the city's lifeblood, remained a bustling thoroughfare, dotted with barges and small boats, connecting London to the wider world. The legal and administrative systems also saw significant changes. The Domesday Book, commissioned by William in 1085, was a meticulous survey of all land and property in England, including London. It was an unprecedented undertaking, designed to assess taxable wealth and consolidate royal power. For London, it provided a snapshot of its economic structure and land ownership at a pivotal moment in its history, though its details for the city itself are less comprehensive than or rural areas. The creation of specialized royal courts and the development of common law based on Norman legal traditions gradually replaced the more localized Anglo-Saxon legal customs. This centralization of justice further solidified London's role as the administrative heart of the kingdom. The centuries that followed the Conquest saw London continue its steady ascent. The city became a focal point for national events, both joyous and tragic. Royal processions, tournaments, and celebrations filled its streets, but so too did protests, rebellions, and the grim specter of plague. The Peasants' Revolt in 1381, led by Wat Tyler, saw thousands of rebels march on London, demanding social and economic reforms. They burned buildings, attacked symbols of authority, and even briefly held the Tower of London. The young King Richard II, displaying remarkable courage, rode out to meet them, eventually defusing the crisis. But the event highlighted the simmering tensions beneath the surface of medieval society and London's vulnerability as a center of power. Despite such upheavals, London's population continued to grow, reaching perhaps 80,000 to 100,000 by the late Middle Ages, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. This growth was fueled by continued trade, immigration from the countryside, and its status as the seat of government. The city's infrastructure struggled to keep pace. Sanitation remained a major challenge, with open sewers and waste disposal issues contributing to disease. Yet, the resilience of its citizens and the inherent advantages of its location allowed London to overcome these obstacles. The medieval period also saw the development of London Bridge, a marvel of engineering for its time. The first stone bridge, completed in 1209, was not just a crossing, but a bustling street in itself, lined with shops and houses, and even a chapel dedicated to Thomas Becket. It was a vital artery, connecting the city to the South Bank and serving as a powerful symbol of London's commercial prowess and ingenuity. The bridge was a constant hive of activity, its narrow passageway often choked with traffic, its shops selling a bewildering array of goods. It stood for centuries, a testament to the ambition of medieval Londoners. The city's relationship with the monarchy remained complex. While the kings resided in Westminster, London often served as a counterweight to royal power, its wealthy citizens and powerful guilds sometimes challenging the crown. The Lord Mayor of London, an office that evolved during this period, became a significant figure, representing the city's interests and often acting as a mediator between the crown and the populace. The city's independent spirit, rooted in its ancient liberties, continued to assert itself. As the Middle Ages drew to a close, London stood as a vibrant, complex, and powerful city. The shadow cast by William the Conqueror's Tower had indeed been long, but it had also provided a framework for growth, stability, and the eventual emergence of a truly global capital. The Norman legacy, initially one of conquest, had merged with the Anglo-Saxon foundations, creating a unique urban identity. The echoes of French spoken in the courts, the grand stone churches, the bustling guilds, and the enduring presence of Westminster Abbey all spoke to a period of profound transformation, a crucible in which the future of London, and indeed England, was forged. The city, having weathered invasion, plague, and rebellion, was poised on the brink of a new era. Its foundations solid, its spirit resilient, and its gaze fixed firmly on the horizon. The quiet murmur of the Thames, ever present, continued its flow as the 15th century drew to a close, carrying with it the echoes of a kingdom weary from the Wars of the Roses. A new dawn, however, was breaking, heralded by the arrival of the Tudors. With Henry VII's ascent to the throne in 1485, a fresh chapter began for London, one marked by a burgeoning sense of national identity and a gradual yet profound shift in the city's very soul. The medieval tapestry, woven with threads of feudalism and monastic devotion, began to unravel, replaced by a more centralized, ambitious design. London, already a bustling port and administrative hub, was poised to become the beating heart of a new, powerful England. The early Tudor years brought a sense of stability, allowing London's merchants to thrive. The city's population, though still relatively small by modern standards, was steadily growing, fueled by migration from the countryside and the increasing opportunities within its walls. Guilds, though their power would eventually wane, still held sway, ensuring quality and regulating trade. The narrow, winding streets, many still unpaved, buzzed with the sounds of commerce. The cries of street vendors, the clang of hammers from smithies, the creak of carts laden with goods from the docks. The Tower of London, no longer primarily a royal residence, solidified its role as a formidable prison and a symbol of royal authority, its cold stone walls holding secrets and whispers of those who had fallen from grace. Then came Henry VIII, a monarch whose reign, beginning in 1509, would irrevocably reshape England and, by extension, London. His desire for a male heir and his passionate yet ultimately destructive pursuit of Anne Boleyn ignited the English Reformation. This was no mere theological dispute. It was a seismic shift that tore at the very fabric of society, dismantling centuries of established religious practice and transferring immense wealth and power from the church to the crown. London, with its numerous monasteries, abbeys, and friaries, felt the impact most acutely. The dissolution of the monasteries, beginning in 1536, saw venerable institutions like Westminster Abbey and St. Paul's Cathedral stripped of their treasures, their lands confiscated, and their communities dispersed. While Westminster Abbey was spared complete destruction and repurposed as a collegiate church, many others were razed, their stones repurposed for new buildings, their libraries scattered, their ancient chants silenced. This act, driven by royal decree, was a stark demonstration of the king's absolute power and fundamentally altered the city's landscape and spiritual life. The economic consequences for London were complex. While the crown gained vast wealth and some of the confiscated lands were sold off, leading to new developments, the social safety net provided by the monasteries for the poor and sick was largely dismantled. This contributed to a growing problem of poverty and vagrancy in the city, a challenge that subsequent Elizabethan poor laws would attempt to address. Yet amidst this upheaval, London continued to grow, its mercantile class, emboldened by new opportunities and less constrained by traditional religious holidays, expanded its reach. The Royal Exchange, founded in 1565 by Sir Thomas Gresham, became a bustling center for international trade, a testament to London's growing economic prowess. Merchants from across Europe gathered there, exchanging goods and news, their voices mingling in a cacophony of languages. The reign of Elizabeth I, commencing in 1558, ushered in what many consider a golden age for England, and certainly for London. The city became a vibrant, expanding metropolis, a true center of art, commerce, and political intrigue. The religious tensions, though still present, began to recede, allowing for a period of relative stability and cultural flourishing. The population of London surged, reaching an estimated 200,000 by the end of Elizabeth's reign, making it one of the largest cities in Europe. This rapid growth, however, brought its own challenges. Sanitation was rudimentary, and outbreaks of plague were a constant threat, sweeping through the crowded streets with terrifying regularity. The Great Plague of 1603, for instance, claimed tens of thousands of lives in the city. Despite these hardships, London's cultural life blossomed. This was the era of William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and Ben Jonson. Theater, once confined to inn yards and temporary stages, found a permanent home on the south bank of the Thames. outside the city's official jurisdiction. The Globe Theatre, built in 1599, became an iconic symbol of this theatrical renaissance. Imagine the scene. Groundlings standing elbow to elbow in the open air, noblemen seated in the galleries, all captivated by the power of language and performance. These wooden O's, as Shakespeare himself called them, were more than just entertainment venues. They were melting pots of society, where rich and poor, educated and illiterate, could gather to witness the human drama unfold. Historians still disagree whether Shakespeare himself was a regular performer at the Globe or primarily a playwright and shareholder, but his indelible mark on London's cultural landscape is undeniable. The city's infrastructure also saw significant development. While many streets remained narrow and unpaved, efforts were made to improve sanitation and water supply. The construction of the New River, an ambitious engineering project completed in 1613, brought fresh water from Hertfordshire directly to London, a vital step in improving public health. London Bridge, still the only bridge across the Thames within the city, remained a bustling thoroughfare, lined with houses and shops, a miniature town in itself spanning the river. Its arches, however, sometimes posed a navigational challenge for larger ships, leading to the development of docks further downstream. London's role as a center of commerce expanded dramatically. The East India Company, founded in 1600, was a testament to England's growing global ambitions. Its ships, laden with spices, silks, and other exotic goods from distant lands, docked in the Thames, transforming London into a hub of international trade. The city's docks hummed with activity, a symphony of creaking ropes, shouting sailors, and the rhythmic loading and unloading of cargo. This global reach brought new wealth, but also new ideas and challenges, as Londoners encountered cultures and commodities previously unknown. The coffee houses, which would become so prevalent in later centuries, began to emerge, albeit in nascent forms, as places for merchants and intellectuals to gather, discuss news, and conduct business. The political landscape of Elizabethan London was equally dynamic. The royal court, often resident at Whitehall Palace, was the nerve center of the kingdom, a place of power, intrigue, and elaborate ceremonies. The city's proximity to the court meant that Londoners were keenly aware of political developments, from the Spanish Armada's threat in 1588, which galvanized the nation and saw Londoners rally to its defense, to the various plots and conspiracies that punctuated the Queen's reign. The execution of Mary, Queen of Scots, in 1587, for instance, sent ripples of both relief and unease through the city. Beyond the grand pronouncements and historical events, daily life in Elizabethan London was a rich tapestry of sights, sounds, and smells. The air, often thick with the smoke from countless hearths and industrial workshops, carried the scent of baking bread, brewing ale, and the less pleasant odors from open sewers. Street hawkers cried their wares, from fresh fish to hot pies. Apprentices, bound to their masters for years, learned their trades in workshops that spilled out onto the streets. Children played in alleys, their laughter mingling with the clatter of horses. Drawn carts. Though the city walls still stood, defining its ancient boundaries, London was beginning to burst beyond them, with new suburbs developing rapidly, particularly to the west. This outward expansion, however, was largely unplanned, leading to a sprawling, often chaotic urban landscape. The intellectual currents of the age also found fertile ground in London. Gresham College, established in 1597, provided free public lectures in various subjects, from astronomy to law, contributing to the city's reputation as a center of learning. Scholars and thinkers congregated in London, drawn by its libraries, its printing presses, and the opportunity to exchange ideas. This intellectual ferment, coupled with the flourishing of arts and commerce, created a truly vibrant atmosphere. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of this era, beyond the grand narratives of kings and queens, lies in the subtle shift in London's identity. From a walled medieval town, it was transforming into a truly metropolitan city, a place where people from all walks of life, from across England and beyond, came to seek their fortunes, to witness the latest plays, or simply to be part of the bustling, ever-changing urban experience. The city was becoming a crucible of modernity. As the 17th century dawned, a new kind of tension began to hum beneath the cobbled streets of London. A discord, not of foreign invasion, but of internal strife. The age of exploration and Renaissance curiosity had given way to a deepening chasm between Crown and Parliament, fueled by religious differences and a struggle for power. Charles I, a monarch who believed in the divine right of kings, found himself increasingly at odds with a parliament determined to assert its own authority and the liberties of the English people. The air in London grew thick with political sermons and pamphlets, the whispers of discontent turning into a roar. By 1642, the simmering tensions erupted into open conflict. The English Civil War began, a tragic clash that pitted countrymen against countrymen, often dividing families and communities. London, a vibrant center of trade and a stronghold of parliamentarian support, found itself at the heart of the conflict. The city's defenses, once intended to keep out foreign invaders, were now turned inward, preparing for a siege that never fully materialized in the conventional sense. Instead, the war was fought across the breadth of England, its echoes resounding through London's streets as news of battles and shifting allegiances arrived. The city's population, accustomed to the pageantry of royal processions, now witnessed the grim reality of soldiers marching through their thoroughfares, the clatter of arms replacing the cheerful cries of merchants. The war dragged on for years, a period of immense upheaval and uncertainty. London, despite its parliamentarian sympathies, felt the weight of the conflict in every aspect of daily life. Trade was disrupted, the flow of goods into and out of the port diminished, and the city's economy suffered. Yet amidst the hardship, a different kind of resilience emerged. Londoners adapted, forming militias, contributing to the war effort, and enduring the privations that came with prolonged conflict. The grand houses of the nobility, once bustling with courtly life, stood quieter, some even requisitioned for military purposes. The culmination of this bitter struggle arrived in 1649, a moment that sent shockwaves not only through London but across Europe. King Charles I, defeated and captured, was brought to trial in Westminster Hall, a stone's throw from the very palace where he had once held court. In a truly unprecedented act, a reigning monarch was put on trial by his own subjects for treason. The verdict, delivered on January 27th, was guilty. 3 days later, on a cold gray morning, Charles I was executed outside the banqueting house in Whitehall. The silence that fell over London after the axe fell must have been profound, a collective gasp of disbelief and apprehension. This act of regicide, the killing of a king, shattered centuries of tradition and fundamentally altered the course of English history. It was a stark demonstration of Parliament's power and a moment that historians still debate intensely. Was it a necessary step towards modern democracy or a tragic act of revolutionary excess? The answer, perhaps, lies in the eyes of the beholder. shaped by the passage of time and the shifting perspectives of history. For the next 11 years, England was a republic, a commonwealth, ruled by Parliament and, for much of that time, by Oliver Cromwell as Lord Protector. London, once the seat of monarchy, now navigated a different political landscape. The theatres, once a vibrant part of city life, were closed down by the Puritan government, their boisterous performances deemed immoral. Public holidays were curtailed, and a more austere way of life was encouraged. Yet beneath this veneer of strictness, London continued to be a hub of political discourse, intellectual debate, and clandestine activities. The city's resilient spirit, accustomed to adapting to change, found new ways to express itself, even under the watchful eye of the Protectorate. When Cromwell died in 1658, the Commonwealth began to unravel. The experiment in republicanism, while transformative, had not fully taken root in the hearts of all Londoners, many of whom yearned for the stability and familiar order that a monarchy represented. Whispers of a restoration grew louder, and by 1660, the stage was set for the return of the king. Charles II, son of the executed monarch, was invited back from exile. His arrival in London on May 29th, his 30th birthday, was met with an explosion of joy and relief. The streets were thronged with cheering crowds, bells pealed, and bonfires lit up the night sky. The Restoration, as it came to be known, marked a profound shift in the city's mood. The austerity of the Puritan years was cast aside, replaced by a renewed embrace of pleasure, fashion, and the arts. The theaters reopened, their stages once again alive with plays, often reflecting the witty and sometimes bawdy spirit of the new age. London, it seemed, breathed a collective sigh of relief, ready to dance, feast, and rebuild. Yet this renewed vigor was soon to be tested by two devastating blows that would forever scar the city's memory. The first arrived in 1665, the Great Plague. Though outbreaks of plague had been a recurring nightmare for centuries, this particular epidemic was of a terrifying scale. It began slowly, a few isolated cases in the spring, but by summer it had taken hold with a horrifying grip. The streets of London, usually bustling, grew eerily quiet. The chilling cry of "Bring out your dead" echoed through the deserted lanes as carts collected the bodies of the afflicted. Houses were marked with a red cross, a grim warning that plague resided within. Wealthy citizens fled to the countryside, but the vast majority of Londoners, especially the poor, had nowhere to go. The city became a place of fear, suffering, and death. It's estimated that over 100,000 people, roughly a quarter of London's population at the time, perished in the Great Plague. The sheer scale of the mortality, the overwhelming sorrow, and the disruption to daily life were immense. One lesser-known detail from this period is the role of animals. Cats and dogs were often killed in an attempt to stop the spread of the disease, but tragically misguided effort that likely only worsened the rat problem, which carried the fleas responsible for transmitting the plague. Before London could fully recover from the psychological and demographic devastation of the plague, another catastrophe struck. In the early hours of September 2nd, 1666, a fire broke out in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane, near London Bridge. It was a Sunday, and the city, still reeling from the plague, was dry from a long, hot summer. A strong easterly wind fanned the flames, and the closely packed, timber-framed houses, many with thatched roofs, provided abundant fuel. What started as a small blaze quickly escalated into an inferno. The Great Fire of London raged for 4 days, consuming everything in its path. The narrow, winding streets that had defined medieval London became corridors of fire, the flames leaping from building to building with terrifying speed. Attempts to fight the fire were hampered by the lack of organized fire brigades and effective equipment. The traditional method of creating fire breaks by pulling down houses was often delayed by disputes over property ownership. The roar of the flames, the cracking of timbers, and the screams of terrified citizens filled the air. The sky above London glowed an apocalyptic red, visible for miles around. Samuel Pepys, whose famous diary provides a vivid eyewitness account, described seeing a most horrid, malicious, bloody flame, not like the fine flame of an ordinary fire. When the fire finally died down, largely due to the wind dropping and the use of gunpowder to create effective fire breaks, the scale of the destruction was almost unimaginable. Over 13,000 houses, 87 parish churches, St. Paul's Cathedral, religious etc., exchange, and countless other public buildings were reduced to ashes. The medieval heart of London, with its labyrinthine lanes and ancient structures, was gone. Approximately 80% of the walled city was destroyed. Yet, remarkably, the loss of life was relatively small, officially recorded as only a handful of people, though historians still debate whether this figure is accurate, suspecting many deaths went unrecorded or were attributed to other causes in the chaos. This low official death toll, compared to the plague, is often attributed to the fire's slow, relentless spread, which allowed most people time to escape. From the ashes of this immense destruction, however, a new London began to rise. The Great Fire, while devastating, also presented an unprecedented opportunity for urban planning and rebuilding. King Charles II immediately issued a proclamation for the city to be rebuilt with brick and stone, rather than timber, to prevent future fires. He also established a commission for rebuilding, appointing two brilliant minds to oversee the monumental task, Sir Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke. Sir Christopher Wren, a polymath of extraordinary talent, an astronomer, mathematician, and anatomist, now turned his genius to architecture. He envisioned a grand new London, with wide, straight avenues, grand public squares, and magnificent new buildings. While his most ambitious plans for a completely redesigned street layout were ultimately thwarted by the complexities of land ownership and property rights, Wren's influence on the rebuilt city was profound and lasting. His greatest legacy was the reconstruction of the city's churches. Of the 87 parish churches destroyed, Wren was responsible for designing 51 of them, each a unique masterpiece, yet all bearing his distinctive classical style. These churches, with their elegant spires and domes, became beacons of hope and resilience, dotting the London skyline. The crowning glory of Wren's work, and indeed of the entire rebuilding effort, was the new St. Paul's Cathedral. The old St. Paul's, a magnificent medieval edifice, had been completely consumed by the fire. Wren's design for the new cathedral was a bold, innovative vision, blending classical elements with a soaring Baroque grandeur. Construction began in 1675 and continued for over 35 years, becoming a symbol of London's rebirth and enduring faith. The magnificent dome, inspired by St. Peter's in Rome, became an iconic landmark, dominating the city's skyline for centuries, a testament to human ingenuity and perseverance in the face of adversity. The sheer scale of the undertaking, the meticulous planning, and the craftsmanship involved in building St. Paul's were immense, employing thousands of skilled laborers and artisans over decades. The rebuilding of London was not just about architecture, it was about a renewed spirit. The city emerged from the ashes of plague and fire with a renewed vigor, embracing scientific discovery and burgeoning trade. The Royal Society, founded in 1660, flourished in this environment, with figures like Isaac Newton and Robert Hooke leading groundbreaking research. London became a hub of intellectual inquiry, a place where new ideas were discussed, debated, and disseminated. Coffee houses, which had begun to appear in the mid-17th century, became vital centers of social and intellectual life, where merchants, politicians, writers, and scientists gathered to exchange news, conduct business, and engage in lively discourse. These establishments, often specializing in news and gossip, were the precursors to modern financial markets and political clubs. Trade, too, experienced a resurgence. The Port of London, despite the devastation, quickly resumed its vital role as a global trading hub. New trading companies were established, expanding England's reach across the globe. The city's merchants, ever resilient, found new opportunities in the burgeoning colonial empires and the increasing demand for goods from distant lands. The Royal Exchange, rebuilt and grander than before, once again became the beating heart of London's commerce. The Restoration era, therefore, was a period of profound transformation for London. It was a time of recovery and rebuilding, but also of cultural flourishing and intellectual advancement. From the trauma of civil war, regicide, plague, and fire, London did not merely survive, it reinvented itself. The city that emerged was more modern, more resilient, and more outward-looking. The wide streets, brick buildings, and magnificent churches of Wren's design laid the foundations for the London we recognize today, a testament to the enduring spirit of a city that has faced unimaginable challenges and risen, time and again, from its own ashes. The scars of the 17th century remained, woven into the fabric of its history, but they were also a reminder of its extraordinary capacity for renewal and progress. As the 18th century dawned, a new spirit, both grand and pragmatic, began to reshape London. The Great Fire had cleared much of the medieval labyrinth, and though Wren's grand vision for a unified city had not fully materialized, the impulse for order and elegance found its expression in the rising tide of Georgian architecture. This was an age of reason, of Enlightenment ideals, and of a burgeoning empire that funneled immense wealth into the capital. The city, once a collection of disparate villages and wards, began to coalesce into something more unified, more self-consciously metropolitan. The most visible transformation was the proliferation of the Georgian square. These elegant, often symmetrical arrangements of terraced houses, typically centered around a private garden, offered a stark contrast to the haphazard growth of earlier centuries. Bloomsbury Square, laid out in the late 17th century, but truly flourishing in the 18th, and then later, the magnificent Grosvenor Square, begun around 1720, exemplify this new urban ideal. They offered spacious, light-filled residences for the burgeoning upper and middle classes, who sought respite from the crowded, often unsanitary conditions of older parts of the city. These squares were not merely architectural statements, they were social ecosystems, where the elite could promenade, socialize, and display their wealth and status. The very rhythm of life within these squares, from the daily rituals of tea and calls to the seasonal migrations to country estates, spoke of a new, refined urbanity. Beyond the private residences, London's public face also underwent a dramatic change. Grand public buildings rose, reflecting the city's growing importance as a center of commerce, governance, and culture. The British Museum, founded in 1753 and initially housed in Montague House, opened its doors in 1759, a testament to an age that valued knowledge and discovery. Its collections, gathered from across the expanding empire and from the intellectual curiosity of its patrons, symbolized London's position as a global hub of learning. Meanwhile, the Bank of England, a relatively new institution established in 1694, began to assert its architectural presence. Though its current monumental form would evolve later, its growing influence on the nation's finances during the 18th century was undeniable, solidifying London's role as the world's financial capital. The Royal Exchange, rebuilt after the Great Fire, continued to be the bustling heart of commercial activity, its arcades echoing with the clamor of merchants and the rustle of bills of exchange. The expansion was not merely aesthetic. It was driven by a relentless economic engine. The docks along the Thames continued their ceaseless activity, handling an ever-increasing volume of goods from every corner of the globe. Sugar from the West Indies, tea from China, spices from India, timber from North America, all flowed into London, enriching merchants and fueling a consumer revolution. Coffee houses, which had emerged in the late 17th century, truly flourished in the Georgian era, becoming vital centers of intellectual and commercial exchange. Lloyd's Coffee House, for instance, evolved into the world-renowned insurance market, a testament to the informal yet powerful networks that underpinned London's economic might. These establishments buzzed with conversation, news, and the forging of deals, their smoky interiors a microcosm of the city's vibrant, energetic spirit. Yet beneath this veneer of elegance and prosperity, social inequalities persisted. Indeed, deepened. The wealth generated by empire and industry was not evenly distributed. While the gentry and the burgeoning middle class enjoyed the comforts of Georgian squares and new consumer goods, the vast majority of Londoners lived in far more precarious circumstances. The rookeries, overcrowded and squalid slums, festered in the shadows of grand new developments. Areas like St. Giles, notorious for its poverty and crime, stood in stark contrast to the refined streets of Mayfair or Marylebone. The influx of people from the countryside, drawn by the promise of work, often found only grueling labor, low wages, and dire living conditions. Child labor was rampant, and the workhouses, though intended to provide relief, often became places of last resort, feared and reviled. The paradox of Georgian London lay in this stark dichotomy. Immense wealth and sophisticated culture coexisted with widespread poverty and social unrest. Gin Lane, immortalized by William Hogarth's searing engravings, depicted the devastating effects of cheap gin on the urban poor, a stark commentary on the social ills of the age. Public executions at Tyburn, though less frequent than in earlier centuries, remained a grim spectacle, a reminder of the harsh justice meted out to those who transgressed society's laws. Often driven by desperation, despite these shadows, the intellectual and artistic life of London flourished with remarkable vigor. The Enlightenment's emphasis on reason, science, and individual liberty found fertile ground in the city. Learned societies, like the Royal Society, continued their scientific inquiries, while new literary clubs and salons provided spaces for intellectual discourse. Dr. Samuel Johnson, a towering figure of the age, held court in various taverns and coffee houses, his wit and wisdom shaping the literary landscape. His monumental Dictionary of the English Language, published in 1755, was a singular achievement, attempting to codify and define the language of a burgeoning empire. The theater, too, experienced a golden age, with new plays and celebrated actors drawing large audiences to Covent Garden and Drury Lane. The pleasure gardens, like Vauxhall and Ranelagh, offered a different kind of entertainment, combining music, fireworks, and social promenading, a chance for all classes, albeit segregated, to partake in the city's burgeoning leisure culture. The political landscape of London during this period was equally dynamic. The rise of Parliament's power, the machinations of Whig and Tory factions, and the occasional outbursts of popular protest all played out against the backdrop of the city. The Gordon Riots of 1780, a violent anti-Catholic uprising, shocked the nation and demonstrated the volatile undercurrents of public sentiment that could erupt despite the prevailing ideals of order and reason. These events, though disturbing, also highlight London's role as a crucible of political change, a place where ideas, both radical and conservative, clashed and evolved. One lesser-known detail from this period is the widespread practice of crying the news. Before the advent of mass-produced newspapers, news vendors, known as news hawkers or news criers, would walk the streets of London, loudly proclaiming the headlines of the latest pamphlets and broadsheets. Their distinctive calls, often rhyming or melodious, would echo through the squares and alleyways, bringing tidings of battles, political scandals, and sensational crimes to a largely illiterate populace. This oral tradition of news dissemination created a unique soundscape for Georgian London, a constant murmur of information and gossip carried on the wind. Historians still debate the extent to which London's seemingly orderly Georgian expansion was a deliberate, top-down planning exercise versus a more organic, market-driven phenomenon. While some grand schemes, like those proposed by the Bedford and Grosvenor estates, clearly demonstrated intentional design, much of the city's growth, particularly in areas like the East End, was a more chaotic, piecemeal affair, driven by speculative builders and the urgent demands of a rapidly increasing population. Was it the vision of enlightened landowners or the relentless pressure of demographic growth that truly shaped the Georgian city? Perhaps it was a complex interplay of both, a dynamic tension between aspiration and necessity, between the grand designs of architects and the everyday realities of bricklayers and laborers. As the century drew to a close, London stood on the cusp of another transformation. The Industrial Revolution, already underway in other parts of Britain, would soon bring new technologies, new industries, and new waves of migration to the capital. The elegant Georgian squares would remain symbols of a refined age, but the city around them would continue its relentless expansion, growing ever larger, ever more complex. The foundations laid in the 18th century of a global trading hub, a financial powerhouse, and a center of intellectual life would serve as the bedrock for London's future as the world's largest and most influential city. The whispers of horse-drawn carriages on cobbled streets, the distant clang of church bells, and the murmur of 1,000 conversations in coffeehouses and taverns, all contributed to the evolving symphony of a city that never truly slept, always reaching, always expanding. The soft glow of gas lamps began to chase away the lingering shadows of dawn, painting the cobbled streets of London in hues of amber and gold. The city, ever a living, breathing entity, was stirring. But now, in the heart of the 19th century, its awakening was different, louder, more profound. The gentle clatter of horse-drawn carriages was increasingly punctuated by a new, insistent rhythm, the hiss of steam, the clang of iron, and the distant, rhythmic chugging that heralded the age of the railway. London was no longer merely growing, it was exploding, transformed by the relentless, transformative power of the Industrial Revolution. By the mid-Victorian era, London had swelled to become the largest city the world had ever seen. Its population, once a mere fraction, now numbered in the millions, drawing people from every corner of the British Isles and beyond, all seeking opportunity, or perhaps simply escape. In its sprawling embrace, the very fabric of the city was being rewoven, its ancient pathways now crisscrossed by gleaming iron tracks, its skyline punctuated by towering factory chimneys that belched plumes of smoke into the perpetually overcast sky. The Thames, once a serene artery, now teemed with steamboats and barges, a watery highway of commerce and industry. This was a city of unparalleled contrasts. On one hand, there were the grand architectural statements of imperial might and technological prowess. The Crystal Palace, a shimmering edifice of glass and iron, erected for the Great Exhibition of 1851 in Hyde Park, stood as a testament to human ingenuity and global ambition. It housed wonders from across the empire and beyond, intricate machinery, exotic plants, and dazzling displays of artistry, drawing millions of visitors and cementing London's reputation as the world's commercial and cultural nexus. Imagine the sheer wonder of walking into that vast, sun-drenched space, the light filtering through thousands of glass panes, reflecting off polished brass and shimmering silks, the air alive with the murmur of 1,000 languages and the soft hum of invention. It was a vision of a future that felt both tangible and impossibly grand. Beyond the exhibition halls, the city's infrastructure was undergoing a radical overhaul. The Metropolitan Railway, the world's first underground railway, opened in 1863, burrowing beneath the very foundations of the city. Its steam-powered trains, initially pulling gas-lit wooden carriages, offered a glimpse into a subterranean world, a marvel of engineering that promised to alleviate the crushing congestion above ground. The construction itself was an immense undertaking, often involving the cut-and-cover method, where streets were dug up, tracks laid, and then covered over again, disrupting daily life but ultimately reshaping the urban landscape. Historians still debate the true impact of the initial underground lines on Londoners' daily commutes. While revolutionary, their limited reach meant many still relied on horse-drawn omnibuses for decades. Yet beneath this glittering veneer of progress and prosperity, a darker reality festered. The rapid, unplanned growth of the city led to unimaginable squalor for vast swathes of its population. While the wealthy resided in elegant townhouses in newly developed areas like Belgravia and Mayfair, the working classes were crammed into overcrowded, unsanitary rookeries. Areas like the East End became synonymous with poverty, disease, and crime. Tenements housed multiple families in single rooms, lacking basic sanitation, and fresh water was a luxury. The air was thick with the stench of human waste, industrial pollution, and the pervasive smell of coal smoke. The Great Stink of 1858, when the Thames became so polluted with raw sewage that the stench permeated the entire city, even forcing Parliament to suspend sittings, served as a grim, undeniable testament to the urgent need for sanitary reform. This environmental catastrophe, more than any abstract argument, spurred Joseph Bazalgette's monumental undertaking, the construction of London's vast underground sewer system. This engineering marvel, completed over many years, diverted sewage away from the Thames, transforming public health and virtually eradicating cholera, which had plagued the city for decades. It was a silent revolution, unseen by most, yet profoundly impactful, literally cleaning the foundations of the metropolis. The social reformers of the era, deeply troubled by the stark inequalities they witnessed, began to document and expose these harsh realities. Charles Booth's monumental Life and Labor of the People in London, but detailed survey conducted in the late 19th century meticulously mapped poverty street by street, using different colors to denote varying levels of destitution. His work, alongside the powerful novels of Charles Dickens, whose vivid descriptions of London's workhouses, debtors' prisons, and impoverished streets resonated deeply with the public, brought the plight of the poor into sharp focus. Dickens's Oliver Twist, published in 1838, painted a harrowing picture of child poverty and criminal gangs, stirring the conscience of a nation. The rise of philanthropic organizations, driven by a Victorian sense of moral duty, sought to alleviate suffering. George Peabody, an American philanthropist, funded the construction of model dwellings for the working class, offering clean, affordable housing with shared facilities, a stark contrast to the squalid tenements. The Salvation Army, founded by William Booth in the East End in 1865, provided food, shelter, and spiritual guidance to the destitute, their brass bands and fervent sermons a familiar sight and sound in the grittier parts of the city. Education, too, became a battleground for reform. The Elementary Education Act of 1870 made schooling compulsory for children aged 5 to 13, gradually opening up opportunities for the working class that had been unimaginable just a generation before. Ragged schools, initially established by voluntary efforts, provided basic education and food for the poorest children, offering a glimmer of hope in lives otherwise defined by hardship. Perhaps these humble classrooms, with their rough benches and flickering gaslight, truly were the seeds of future progress, nurturing minds that might otherwise have been lost to the streets. The city's cultural landscape also flourished, reflecting its newfound wealth and global reach. The British Museum, its collections continually expanding with treasures from across the empire, became a repository of world history and art. The National Gallery, housing masterpieces from European art, opened its doors to the public, offering beauty and inspiration to all who sought it. Parks like Regent's Park and Hyde Park, once royal hunting grounds, became accessible to the public, offering vital green spaces for recreation and respite from the urban sprawl. On Sundays, families would promenade in their finest clothes, a gentle escape from the week's toil. Yet the social fabric remained complex and often fraught. The burgeoning population, coupled with economic fluctuations, led to periods of intense unemployment and social unrest. Match girls at Bryant and May's factory in Bow went on strike in 1888, protesting against harsh working conditions and the debilitating effects of phosphorus poisoning. This strike, though small in scale, garnered significant public sympathy and is often cited as a pivotal moment in the history of trade unionism and women's rights, demonstrating the growing power of organized labor to challenge the status quo. The very air of London in the Victorian era was thick with contradictions, the grandeur of its new institutions side by side with the grim reality of its slums, the roar of progress competing with the whispers of desperation. It was a city of unparalleled innovation, where electricity began to flicker in public spaces, telephones began to connect distant voices, and motor cars, though still a rarity, hinted at the dawn of a new age of transport. The iconic red pillar boxes, introduced in the 1850s, became ubiquitous, symbolizing the efficiency of the postal service, connecting families and businesses across the vast metropolis, and indeed, the world. As the century drew to a close, London stood as a monument to the triumphs and tragedies of the industrial age. It had become the heart of a vast empire, a global financial center, and a crucible of social change. The city's pulse was stronger, faster, more complex than ever before. The echoes of its past, Roman walls, medieval markets, Tudor palaces, were still present, woven into the very fabric of its streets, but they were now overlaid with the insistent rhythms of modernity. The gentle hum of the gas lamps, the distant shriek of a train whistle, the murmur of a million lives lived in close proximity, all contributed to the unique symphony of Victorian London, a city that for all its struggles had truly become the world's greatest metropolis. It was a city that never truly slept, perpetually evolving, perpetually reinventing itself, forever drawing breath from the currents of history and shaping the future with its relentless energy. The faint echo of horse-drawn carriages and the distant rumble of early motor cars faded as the 20th century dawned, ushering in an era of unprecedented change for London. The city, sprawling and confident, stood on the precipice of a new age, yet few could have foreseen the seismic shifts that lay ahead. The Edwardian calm, a brief golden glow, soon gave way to the gathering storm clouds of global conflict. When the First World War erupted in 1914, London, though not on the front lines, felt its impact profoundly. Zeppelins, those silent, ominous airships, became the city's first aerial tormentors, their bombs a stark new reality for a populace accustomed to peace. The air raids, though relatively limited by later standards, instilled a deep-seated fear and a newfound vulnerability. The very fabric of daily life was altered. Women stepped into roles previously held by men, factories churned out munitions, and the rhythm of the city beat to the drum of war. The armistice in 1918 brought a collective sigh of relief, but the scars remained, etched onto the faces of its people and the very soul of the city. The Roaring Twenties, a period of tentative recovery, saw London attempting to recapture its vibrancy. Jazz music drifted from smoky clubs, flapper dresses swirled in dance halls, and the city, ever resilient, began to mend. Yet, the economic downturn of the 1930s cast a long shadow, bringing unemployment and hardship to many. The East End, in particular, bore the brunt of these struggles, a stark contrast to the glittering West End. And then, the world held its breath once more. September 1939. The declaration of war against Germany plunged London into an even deeper abyss of uncertainty. This time, the aerial threat was far more sophisticated, far more devastating. The Blitz, a sustained bombing campaign by the Luftwaffe, began in earnest in September 1940. For 57 consecutive nights, and then intermittently for months, the drone of German bombers became the city's terrifying lullaby. The sky above London, once a canvas for clouds, became a stage for fiery destruction. St. Paul's Cathedral, silhouetted against the inferno, became an iconic image of defiance, its dome miraculously spared amidst the surrounding devastation. The tube stations transformed into makeshift shelters, their platforms crowded with families seeking refuge from the nightly onslaught. Children, clutching teddy bears, slept on cold concrete, while adults whispered anxieties and shared what little comfort they could find. The resilience of Londoners during this period was legendary. The phrase "London can take it" became a rallying cry, a testament to their unwavering spirit. Yet, the cost was immense. Tens of thousands of lives were lost, and vast swathes of the city, particularly the historic docklands and residential areas, were reduced to rubble. Buildings that had stood for centuries vanished in a single night. Perhaps the very stones of the city absorbed the collective fear and courage, holding them in their fractured forms. The end of the Second World War in 1945 brought not immediate jubilation, but a profound exhaustion and a daunting task of reconstruction. London was a scarred landscape, a patchwork of bomb sites and damaged buildings. The immediate post-war years were characterized by rationing, austerity, and a slow, painful process of rebuilding. New housing estates began to rise from the ashes, and town planners grappled with the monumental challenge of creating a modern city from the ruins of the old. The Festival of Britain in 1951, held on the South Bank, was a deliberate attempt to inject optimism and a sense of future into a weary nation. Its modernist architecture and celebratory atmosphere offered a glimpse of a brighter tomorrow, a stark contrast to the grim realities of post-war life. The 1950s saw London slowly regain its footing. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, a grand spectacle broadcast globally, inspired a renewed sense of national identity and continuity. Yet beneath the surface, profound social changes were brewing. Immigration from the Commonwealth, particularly from the Caribbean, began to reshape the city's demographic landscape, bringing new cultures, new foods, and new rhythms to its diverse neighborhoods. This influx, while enriching, also presented challenges as communities navigated integration and cultural differences. The 1960s, however, burst forth with an explosion of color, sound, and rebellion that fundamentally redefined London's global image. The swinging 60s transformed the city into a vibrant epicenter of youth culture, fashion, and music. Carnaby Street and King's Road became global fashion hubs, their boutiques overflowing with miniskirts, psychedelic prints, and avant-garde designs. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones, along with a host of other bands, created a soundtrack that reverberated around the world, emanating from London's clubs and recording studios. The city became synonymous with cool, a magnet for artists, musicians, and free spirits from across the globe. This period wasn't just about fashion and music. It was a time of social liberation, challenging traditional norms and pushing boundaries in art, literature, and social attitudes. The emergence of new art movements, experimental theater, and a burgeoning counterculture scene cemented London's reputation as a truly modern, forward-thinking metropolis. Historians still debate the precise moment London truly swung, some pointing to the opening of Mary Quant's Bazaar Boutique in 1955 as a precursor, while others emphasize the mid-60s explosion of pop culture. The 1970s brought new challenges: economic stagnation, industrial unrest, and the growing threat of terrorism cast a more somber mood over the city. The vibrant energy of the 60s began to wane, replaced by a sense of uncertainty. Yet, even amidst these difficulties, London continued to evolve. The punk rock movement, born in the gritty streets of the capital, was a raw, rebellious response to the perceived complacency of the era, a defiant scream against the establishment. It was a stark reminder that London, even in its struggles, remained a crucible of creativity and dissent. The 1980s saw a period of significant economic restructuring under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. The deregulation of financial markets, known as the Big Bang in 1986, transformed the City of London into a global financial powerhouse, attracting immense investment and talent. Docklands, once the heart of London's maritime trade, underwent a massive regeneration, with Canary Wharf rising as a gleaming new financial district. This era brought prosperity to some, but also widened the gap between rich and poor, leading to social tensions. As the millennium approached, London continued its relentless march forward. The 1990s witnessed a resurgence of cultural confidence, with the rise of Britpop music, a vibrant art scene, and a renewed sense of urban cool. The opening of the Tate Modern in 2000, housed in a former power station, symbolized London's embrace of contemporary art and its ability to reinvent its industrial heritage. The London Eye, a massive Ferris wheel on the South Bank, offered a new perspective on the sprawling city, a modern landmark reflecting its global aspirations. The 21st century has seen London solidify its position as a truly global city, a melting pot of cultures, languages, and ideas. Its diversity is now one of its defining characteristics, with communities from every corner of the world calling it home. The city has continued to host major international events, from the 2012 Olympic Games, which showcased its organizational prowess and vibrant spirit, to countless cultural festivals and celebrations. Yet, it has also faced new challenges, including the threat of terrorism, as seen in the 7/7 bombings of 2005, and the ongoing debates surrounding its future role. Look, in a changing world, through 2 world wars, economic booms and busts, social revolutions, and profound cultural shifts, London has not merely endured, it has thrived. Its ability to absorb, adapt, and reinvent itself is perhaps its most remarkable quality. From the ashes of the Blitz, it rose, not as a static monument to the past, but as a dynamic, ever-evolving metropolis. The whispers of Roman legions, the echoes of medieval merchants, the shouts of suffragettes, and the rhythms of reggae and grime music all intertwine in the city's complex tapestry. London remains a city of contrasts, a place where ancient history rubs shoulders with cutting-edge modernity, where quiet garden squares sit beside bustling markets, and where countless stories, both grand and intimate, continue to unfold. Its resilience is etched, not just in its rebuilt architecture, but in the enduring spirit of its people, a spirit that has faced down adversity time and again, always emerging, somehow, stronger. The new millennium dawned over London, not with a sudden roar, but with the quiet hum of progress and the subtle reshaping of its ancient silhouette. The Thames, ever flowing, reflected a skyline that was beginning to stretch higher, bolder, and in some ways more whimsically than ever before. The Millennium Dome, though a subject of much debate and differing opinions, stood as a monumental marker of this transition, a vast, tent-like structure that seemed to inflate on the Greenwich Peninsula, a symbol of a city looking forward. Its construction, initiated in the late 1990s, was a massive undertaking, designed to host the national exhibition celebrating the year 2000. While its immediate success was questioned by some, it undeniably heralded a new era of ambitious architectural projects and a renewed focus on London as a global cultural hub. As the 21st century unfolded, the city continued its relentless evolution. The financial heart of London, the Square Mile and Canary Wharf, saw an explosion of new skyscrapers. Structures like the Gherkin, officially 30 St. Mary Axe, completed in 2004, with its distinctive, almost organic shape, became instant icons. Designed by Norman Foster, its curved glass exterior offered a playful contrast to the more traditional stone and brick of its neighbors. Yet it quickly integrated into the city's visual lexicon. Then came the Shard, piercing the clouds from its Southwark perch, completed in 2012. At over 300 meters, it dramatically redefined the city's southern bank, offering panoramic views that stretched for miles, a testament to London's enduring capacity for vertical growth. These buildings were not merely offices, they were statements reflecting London's continued prominence as a global financial and cultural capital. Beyond the steel and glass, the city's heart beat with an ever-increasing diversity. Waves of immigration from across the Commonwealth and Europe continued to enrich London's social fabric, transforming neighborhoods into vibrant tapestries of cultures, languages, and cuisines. Brick Lane, already known for its Bengali community, became an even more eclectic blend of street art, vintage markets, and a dizzying array of curry houses, while also embracing new influences. Southall, long a hub for the British Asian community, continued to thrive, its streets bustling with shops selling colorful saris, intricate gold jewelry, and the aroma of spices wafting from restaurants. This demographic shift, a continuation of patterns seen throughout the 20th century, profoundly shaped London's identity, making it one of the most multicultural cities on the planet. The London 2012 Olympic Games, a spectacular global event, showcased this diversity on an international stage. The opening ceremony, directed by Danny Boyle, was a vivid narrative of British history and culture, culminating in a celebration of modern, multicultural London, broadcast to billions worldwide. The infrastructure built for the Games, particularly the Olympic Park in Stratford, transformed a previously industrial area of East London into a new urban quarter, complete with housing, parkland, and sporting facilities, leaving a lasting legacy. Technological advancements, too, began to weave themselves inextricably into the city's daily rhythm. The advent of the internet and mobile communication transformed how Londoners lived, worked, and interacted. The iconic red telephone boxes, once ubiquitous, slowly began to recede, their purpose largely supplanted by the omnipresent smartphone. Wi-Fi became a common expectation in cafes, public spaces, and on the underground, connecting individuals to a global network with unprecedented ease. This digital revolution also fueled new industries, with London emerging as a significant hub for tech startups, particularly in areas like Shoreditch, which earned the nickname Tech City. The former warehouses and industrial buildings of East London found new life as co-working spaces and innovative offices, attracting talent from around the world. Yet, amidst this rapid modernization, the city's deep historical roots remained visible, often in unexpected ways. The foundations of Roman Londinium, unearthed during construction projects, continued to offer glimpses into the city's earliest days. The discovery of the remains of the Roman amphitheater near Guildhall in 1988, for instance, provided a tangible link to the city's ancient past, reminding modern Londoners of the gladiatorial contests and public spectacles that once took place beneath their feet. Similarly, the ongoing archaeological digs necessitated by Crossrail, a massive new railway project cutting across the city, unearthed thousands of artifacts, from prehistoric tools to medieval plague pits, offering an unparalleled insight into London's continuous human occupation. These findings often sparked renewed scholarly debate, such as the precise layout of Roman Londinium's port facilities, with new evidence constantly challenging older assumptions about the extent and nature of its early trade. Historians still grapple with the exact configuration of the Roman bridge across the Thames, for example, given the shifting riverbanks over 2 millennia. The river itself, the very artery of London's existence, continued to be a focal point. Efforts to clean the Thames, which had begun in earnest in the mid-20th century, saw remarkable success, with salmon and other fish returning to its waters, a testament to environmental awareness and collective action. The river became not just a conduit for commerce, but a recreational space, with ferries, pleasure boats, and even swimmers occasionally gracing its surface. The London Eye, a massive cantilevered observation wheel on the South Bank, opened to the public in 2000, became an immediate landmark, offering a slow, contemplative journey high above the river, providing a unique perspective on the city's sprawling complexity and its historical layers. From its capsules, one could trace the meandering path of the Thames, observe the ancient city of London nestled among newer towers, and imagine the countless lives that had unfolded along its banks. Challenges, of course, persisted. The pressures of a growing population, the escalating cost of living, and the intricate dance of global politics continued to shape London's trajectory. Public transport networks, though extensive, constantly strained under the weight of millions of daily commuters. The Underground, a marvel of Victorian engineering, underwent continuous upgrades, with new lines and extensions planned and built, such as the Elizabeth line, designed to connect areas far to the east and west, easing congestion and speeding journeys across the capital. Yet, the sheer volume of movement meant that the city remained a place of constant motion, a perpetual ebb and flow of humanity. The echoes of millennia continued to resonate through the city's streets. The names of places, Ludgate, Cheapside, Aldgate, still whispered of Roman gates and Saxon markets. The Tower of London, a formidable Norman fortress, continued to stand guard over the Thames, its ancient stones holding centuries of stories. Westminster Abbey, a site of coronations and royal burials for nearly 1,000 years, remained a living monument to British history. These ancient structures, often dwarfed by the modern skyscrapers that rose around them, served as tangible anchors to the past, reminding Londoners that their city was not merely a collection of buildings, but a living, breathing entity with a profound memory. The winding, often illogical street patterns of the City of London, a legacy of medieval pathways that predated any systematic planning, continued to defy modern grids, a charming testament to organic growth over centuries. As the second decade of the 21st century drew to a close, London remained a city of contrasts, ancient and modern, global and local, bustling and serene. Its future, like any great city, was a tapestry yet to be fully woven, subject to the myriad forces of human endeavor, technological innovation, and the unpredictable currents of history. The Thames flowed on, carrying the reflections of new glass towers and ancient stone walls, carrying the city's story into an uncertain, yet undoubtedly vibrant tomorrow.